side of life.
Hi, I'm Harry Marks, and this is Let's All Go to the Lobby, your introduction to the film you're about to watch. Our first film of Cult Classics Week is a picture that practically defines the category. It's about a newly engaged couple who seek refuge in an old castle during a storm, only to find themselves amongst a bunch of aliens and a fishnet-clad mad scientist. From Richard O'Brien and 20th Century Fox, this is The Rocky Horror Picture Show. The film started life as a stage production, simply called The Rocky Horror Show, written by O'Brien while he was out of work in early 1970s London. O'Brien was an impassioned fan of 1950s B-horror and science fiction movies, as well as the growing genre of glam rock music. Much of the film's cast originated their roles on the stage, including Patricia Quinn, who played Magenta, Little Nell as Columbia, O'Brien as Riff Raff, and Tim Curry as Dr. Frankenfurter. Everything about Curry's performance in the film is iconic, but one thing that stands out is his voice, specifically his accent, which is this kind of exaggerated posh accent. It came about while Curry was struggling to find his character. He'd started out with a German affectation before combining it with the accent of a woman he'd met on a bus, who sounded to him like Queen Elizabeth II. He then sprinkled in what he called his mother's telephone voice. The result was Frankenfurter's distinct tone and enunciation. As for the character's look, that was accomplished with the help of stylist Pierre LaRoche. LaRoche had worked with Mick Jagger and David Bowie, and even created Bowie's signature Ziggy Stardust lightning bolt across his face. As for Jagger, when he heard the show was being turned into a movie, he lobbied for the role of Frankenfurter. Meanwhile, the characters of Brad and Janet needed to be relatively unknown fish-out-of-water types, and for an almost entirely British production, producers went with two American actors. For the role of Brad, Barry Bostwick was cast, though one up-and-coming comedian did audition for the part, Steve Martin. Susan Sarandon took over the role of Janet, her first ever musical. She caught pneumonia during filming on account of the rain and the swimming pool scene, but she refused to stop to recuperate. Sarandon carried on with her scenes while shaking and battling a bad fever. The Frankenfurter castle itself was portrayed by Oakley Court, a Victorian Gothic home built in 1859 that overlooked the Thames. In the late 1940s, it had been occupied by Hammer Films, which was responsible for the Christopher Lee Dracula films, as well as popular horror flicks like The Curse of Frankenstein. Given Rocky Horror's countless nods to Hammer's filmography, it makes sense that O'Brien would want to shoot in such a notable and sacred location. The Rocky Horror Picture Show opened in London and the US in 1975 to mediocre response. It performed okay in a few big cities, but flopped everywhere else. It wasn't until 1976 when Fox executive Tim Deegan convinced the Waverly Theater in New York to start showing it at midnight screenings that the film started to take on its cult-like status. Over the next 2 years, fans started showing up in costume and talking back to the screen at theaters all over the country, a tradition that has since expanded across the globe and continued ever since. Oh, and those ruby red lips at the beginning of the film, those belong to Magenta herself, Patricia Quinn. But the singer, that's all Richard O'Brien. Also starring Tim Curry, Barry Bostwick, Susan Sarandon, Nell Campbell, Peter Hinwood, Jonathan Adams, and Meatloaf. From 20th Century Fox in 1975, this is The Rocky Horror Picture Show.